Well, blessed Tuesday to you as we come with your daily encouragement, and we're in the book of First Samuel. We'll have one at the end at Second Samuel, but it's the story of David and Jonathan. Now, just to recap what we had already heard yesterday, Jonathan is the son of Saul, and of course, David is about the same age as he is, except Jonathan would probably be considered the successor of Saul if it was going to remain in the family in Saul's name. But the Lord is starting to show his rejection of Saul and his affirmation of David. And it seems that Jonathan is on board with being a supporter of David. What Jonathan does not know about is his father's opposition to David. And so we find Jonathan in a very precarious situation. But one of the things that we are to affirm here is the action of David in this case. David is giving space for his friend Jonathan to find out the truth. He's not basically forcing him to say, hey, wake up, your dad is trying to kill me. He's saying, why don't you go investigate yourself and then give me a sign of what you have found. And so in verse 12, if you want to hear yesterday's story, it was the giving of space, but now it is verse 12. Jonathan said to David, by the Lord, the God of Israel, remember when you see Lord, it means Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, the God of Israel, when I have sounded out my father about this time tomorrow, or on the third day, if he is well disposed toward David, shall I not then send and disclose it to you? But if my father intends to do you harm, the Lord do so to Jonathan, and more also, if I do not disclose it to you and send you away so that you may go in safety. May the Lord be with you, as he has been with my father. And if I am still alive, show me the faithful love of the Lord. For if I die, never cut off your faithful love for my house, even if the Lord were to cut every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth. That verse is going to be very instrumental in just a few verses later. Then Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, may the Lord seek out the enemies of David. Jonathan made David swear again by his love for him, for he loved him with the love of his own. Now, a larger theme that we're working on in the teaching of Jesus and the resurrected Jesus in this Easter season is to love the Lord your God and to love your neighbor as yourself. But Jesus expands that into loving one another as he has loved us. So Jonathan has a pretty big ask. It maybe doesn't sound that way, especially if David's house and Saul's house, of which Jonathan is a part of, are going to live in peace. But what's starting to develop is enmity. And of course, that makes a good story, not necessarily a good situation for us to be in, but at least a story that becomes interesting and if not entertaining. And Jonathan makes David promise to protect his house, because if there is going to be a battle, he wants to at least have his remnant survive. And we'll get into that at the end of the week, but just to see that this is preparing yourself for a difficult time. But you're praying that hopefully it will not be a difficult time. I guess if I might explain it in terms of our day, it would be as if we have a good friend who is loyal to maybe the Republican Party and another friend who's very loyal to the Democratic Party. And normally, there's kind of a friendly rivalry between the two parties. But in some cases, depending on how passionate things can get, sometimes it can lead to enmity. Sometimes it can lead to outright conflict. But you have two friends who belong to both parties and they want to remain at peace with one another. And I think that that's one of the examples we have here is that sometimes the friendships, the bonds we have, The love we have for individuals transcend what maybe our larger loyalties are. And that is the case, I think, in some instances. I remember as a child growing up in the Cold War, there was always the stories of the eternal conflict, it seemed we had, between Russia and America, or the Soviet Union and America. And there was always the story about a friendship or even a love affair that would happen between two parties that would transcend the political maneuvering that was going on. That was always kind of a theme. Are you going to be loyal to your country, or are you going to be loyal to your friend? And that's what I think is the theme that's going on here with the relationship between Jonathan and David. They are establishing their own personal covenant beyond the covenants that seem to be based on loyalty to a king and loyalty to a family. And that's what I think the gospel of Jesus Christ tries to do. It tries to look at the person rather than the what that person represents. And that's the thing that we are called to do in this country, I believe, is to look at the person rather than the label we might put on that person. And that has been an internal struggle for us as a nation and continues to be a struggle I've known within people of every nation. When I lived in Slovakia for a brief period of time, it was amazing how many people would take me aside and would start to make a list of people and they were trying to be friendly in doing this, saying, these are the people you should always protect, and these are the people you should always be at enmity in. And I always felt like I'm Switzerland. I'm gonna try to build bridges as best I can. But sometimes you got stuck in that situation where the list that you were given at the beginning of time, that was the question of, well, what should I be loyal to? The humanity of each person or who they represent? And that's the struggle we have in our story today. God bless you today. We trust that these continue to be words of encouragement. Let's continue in our story of Jonathan and David. Take care. We'll see you next time.